Okay, welcome Cloud Gurus, and in this lecture we're going to provision our first EC2 instance. So you can see the AWS console screen here. Yours will probably look a little different. You won't see these preview sections depending on how far along you do the course, but as mentioned in the introduction, I will update this as we go. So right now Lambda is in preview as well as config. So let's go into the EC2 section, and you can see right now we can see our resources. This is basically the splash screen, so we can see I've got no running instances, no volumes, no key pairs, no placement groups, no elastic IP addresses, no snapshots, no load balancers, and one security group, which is the default security group that we have with our default VPC. And so what I want to do now is create an instance. So it's easy as pushing this button, launch instance. And you can see here it gives me a list of different instances. Now I can click here which says free tier only, so this ensures that I'm not going to pay for something unnecessarily or accidentally. So you can see we've got the Amazon Linux machine image, we've got a Red Hat machine image, we've got SUSE, we've got Ubuntu, we've got Windows, and that's Windows 2012 R2 base. We've got different Windows instances going down, and all kinds of different instances. Now depending on when you do this this video, again these might be slightly different, might be Red Hat 8, but I will update this as we go throughout the year. So my favorite image is the Amazon Linux AMI. That's simply because it comes with a lot of things pre-packaged. So you can see here it comes with Ruby, it comes with PHP, Postgres, it comes with Docker, and most importantly it comes with the AWS command line tools already installed on it. So that's really useful because you don't have to go in and install it each time, and we will be using the command line tools quite a bit. For this demonstration we're going to use the AMI, the Amazon Linux AMI. So I'm going to hit select, and you can see here where it's free tier it makes it quite clear, so the rest I'd have to pay for. So I'm going to go for this this T2 micro free tier eligibility instance. It comes with 1 vCPU, 1 gig of memory, the instance storage is EBS only, and the network performance is low to moderate. So I'm going to go down here, and up here by the way you can also change your instance types to all generations if you need some older generations, but we're just going to start with the stock standard T2 micro. So click here and go next and configure the instance details. So I only want one. In the previous lecture we talked about spot instances. So here's where you can set your maximum price, what launch groups you want it in, how long the request is, when it's valid from, how long it's valid to, whether there's any kind of persistence required. As I said in the last time, spot can be like having the rug pulled out from you at any given point. But we'll just leave this for now because we are using free tier, so we will get this for free anyway. So here we select our network. At the moment we're just going to use the default VPC. We can select here what subnet it is, and basically that's just what availability zone it's going to go into. So this is EU West 1A, 1B and 1C. So I'm just going to say any availability zone. We can auto assign public IP address, so say enable or disable or use the subnet settings, which is basically enable. So to access this I do want a public IP address because we're going to SSH into the box. IAM role. Now if you remember in our Identity Access Management course we created an S3 role called S3 Access. Now I am just going to click on that. You won't need it well, you probably will need it in the next few lectures, so it's probably a good idea to go in and click on that. And if you don't have that as an option, please go back to the Identity Access Management lectures and just see how we created that role. Make sure that role is set up for you. The shutdown behavior, you have two options here. You have stop or terminate. We're just going to leave it at stop. So this is basically if you shut down the instance, what does AWS do with that instance? Does it just stop it, or does it actually delete the instance? And we want to just make sure it stops it. So we can shut it down when we're not using it, power it back up again when you want to do the next lecture, etc. That way we're not incurring any kind of fee, and that way it will stay persistent. It won't be deleted off the AWS platform. You You can also protect against accidental termination. This basically, if you're a user and you're going into the Amazon console, you can click terminate and it will actually stop that from happening. You have to disable this. So why don't we just click that to stop any other users who might be using our console accidentally deleting this image. You can enable detailed monitoring, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail in the CloudWatch section at the moment, because this is just our first EC2 instance and we want to stay within free tier. We're just going to leave that unchecked. And then you can talk about your tenancy, whether it's a shared tenancy or single tenancy that's dedicated hardware or private cloud. We definitely don't want to go dedicated tenancy because it'll cost us a fortune. Okay, and if we just scroll down to advanced details, you can see that here you can enter in some text. So this text is where you can pass bootstrap scripts to your EC2 instance that will run upon that when that instance is fired up. So in order to do this, we would type in our shebang, which is the number sign followed by an exclamation mark, and then the path to our interpreter, which is /bin/bash, most commonly on Windows, on Linux systems. And then any command you run under this would be run at root level. So you could have things like yum update, or you could make a directory, for example, a cloud guru. And we will have a lecture on bootstrap scripts coming up in this section. So for now, I'm just going to delete this and move on. We'll go on and add our storage. Now we can see this is going to be our root volume. That's where it's going to be mounted. It's going to be 8 gigs in size, and here's our volume type. Now it's set for as magnetic by default, but if you read here it says general purpose SSD provides the ability blah 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 blah. Free tier eligibility customers can get up to 30 gigs of EBS general purpose SSD or magnetic storage. So if they're going to give me SSD versus magnetic and it's free, I'm going to go for SSD just because we're going to get a lot more IOPS. Okay, and here we can click delete on termination. At the moment it's checked, so if you do terminate that EC2 instance, it will also terminate the EBS volume. It's important to remember this is an EBS volume that we're adding. So we'll leave that as the default now, but you can uncheck that, so if you delete an EC2 instance, you're still keeping the volume. Go on to next. This is where you tag your instances. It's a key value pair. So you might say, I'll give you an example here. So this says name, and this could be web server 1. And if you work at places like Netflix or News UK Limited, they have scripts that actually go in, and if they see an EC2 instance that's been provisioned without any tags, it will actually go in and delete those instances. It's a script called tagbot. So it can be good when you've got really large estates and you've got lots of different employees all with the same AWS console and people spinning up all kinds of different things. This is a good way of basically keeping track. What is this web server? What's it doing? Who owns it, etc. So maybe we'll create a new tag as well and just say owner Ryan Kronenberg. As this is basically just used for day-to-day administration. Okay, we're going to go in and configure our security groups. So right now I'm going to create a new security group. We're going to call this, at the moment it's Launch Wizard 1. Yeah, let's leave it at that, and then the description is when it was created at the exact time. You can see at the moment it's enabling SSH let's go through it. These are the different protocols. So you can have SSH, you can have SMTP, HTTP, etc. You don't need to know port numbers of the most common ones. AWS puts that in by default. So if we change it to RDP, there you go, it's going to put in the port, which is 3389. So SSH is port 22. You see that change. And right now it's throwing up a warning, and it's just saying that this IP address 0.0.0.0/o allows all IP addresses to access your instance. So wherever you are in the world, somebody could SSH into that instance. Obviously they're still going to have a private key in order to access that, and but for now we're just going to leave it as this. It's not secure. Normally what you would do is you would change your source to my IP. So there's my IP address, it's /32, so it means only people from this IP address can access that EC2 instance. Now this can be good and bad. It gives you great security, but if you start up an EC2 instance today and then you want to log into it tomorrow and you don't have a static IP address, your IP address could change, and then you're trying to SSH into an instance and you're like, why can't I connect? And it's because your IP address has changed. So you'd have to go into your security groups and change it back to your IP address. So it's up to you whether or not you want this to be your IP address or not. For the moment I'm just going to say anywhere because this instance isn't going to live very long. If we go to review and launch, and this basically just shows me all the different details about what I've just selected. So the different instance types, its shutdown behaviors, termination protection, the storage that I've chosen. You can see my tags down here, so web server, Ryan Kroonenberg, etc. And if you you can see this warning, which again is just saying that SSH is open to the world. So I'm going to go ahead and launch. And now this is the really important part. This is where we're creating a key. And you've got a public key and a private key. And when I first started, I was like, what's a public key and what's a private key? What's the difference? So the best way to picture it is a public key is like a padlock. And you can have many, many different copies of your padlock or public key, and you can put them in all kinds of different EC2 instances or all kinds of places. And to open that padlock, you need a private key, and you only want one copy of the private key because you can use that private key on the same public key on all these different EC2 instances to open it. But the private key you want to keep private, you want to keep that to yourself. So it says here, choose an existing key pair. We're going to create a new one, and we're just going to call this my EC2 key. And now we're going to download it, and it's going to download it as a .pem file. Now this is good if you're using Linux or a Mac, which is basically Linux based. But if you are using Windows, you're going to need to convert that PEM file into a PPK file. And I will have a lecture specifically on that. It'll either be in this section or it will be in the tools you need to get started. At the moment, what you need to do is just go download it's a program called PuTTY and PuTTY Keygen. PuTTY allows you to SSH in to your instances from any Windows PC, and PuTTY Keygen basically converts this PEM file to a PPK file. So Windows users need a PPK file in order to connect into any EC2 Linux instances. So right now we'll just go and click download key pair. You can see it's gone into my download. Oops. Okay, sorry about that. So it's gone into my download, and now we'll hit launch instances. Okay, so it says it's launching. We'll go to view. It won't take very long at all. So what I'm going to do now is just pause this video, and when it's live we will then bring up a terminal window and we will connect into this instance. Okay, so it's up and running now. You can see under the instance state it says running as our name, web server 1, and we can see the public IP address. So what we now want to do is just connect into that. Like I mentioned, I'm using a Mac, so I'll just show you how we're going to do it on the Mac. So go across to Finder, and I've created a new directory called SSH, which is where I'm going to store my key. The first thing I want to do is go into my downloads directory, grab my key, so just go to edit, copy, and then go back, and then I'm going to paste it into this SSH directory, and I'll need to enter my password. Okay, that's great. Now what we want to do is go into applications, and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see utilities, open that up, and then you'll be able to open up terminal. Now terminal will load, and I'm just going to maximize it here. So at the moment I've made this screen, it's customized so that you can read it quite easily in all the lectures. This is not my favorite view. If you want to change your view, you just go to Terminal and go to Preferences, and you can change your profiles. So my favorite is Homebrew, but when I look at it on the videos, it actually doesn't look that good on a screencast for some reason. So I'm just going to stick with Pro, but with quite big lettering. So right now, if I type ls to list what's in the contents of the directory, we can see SSH. So I'm going to go into my SSH directory, and we can see my EC2 key.pem.txt. I'm just going to rename that to my EC2 key.pem, so I'm going to remove the .txt. Okay, so to rename it, we're just going to type move my EC2 key, and it autofills just by hitting the tab button if you're not familiar with Linux. So now we're going to rename this to my EC2 key.pem. Hit enter. So I'm getting an error here. Obviously I have to be logged in as an administrator, so I'm going to write sudo su, which basically elevates me to root user status. Now I'm going to hit I can't hit up, so now I'm going to try it again and try move my EC2 key to my EC2 key.pem. And there we go. If we go ls, we can now see that it's renamed it to .pem. Okay, so let's clear the screen. Okay, so we're now going to SSH into our EC2 instance. So first thing we need is the IP address. So if we just go across to our console, you can see it's up here. Sometimes it's easier to cut and paste it from the attributes section down here though. So we just right click and go copy. We go back to our console, and we'll just do ls so that we remember the name of our key. If you've never used SSH before, you can just type in SSH to see all the various sort of switches that you can use. But for now, if you just follow what I'm doing, so SSH, right click and go paste. And then we're going to use the username, so -l, and then it's EC2-user. And I'll show you a trick as to how to figure out what the default username is for different Linux images in a second. And then we're going to use the identity file, and then it's myec2.pem. So if we hit enter, it'll now talk about the authenticity can't be established. So basically it's saying, do you want to trust this connection? We can just say yes, yes. And there we go. We have logged into our first Amazon machine image. So we see Amazon Linux AMI. We can see we are EC2 user at, and then the machine name. So the first thing we probably want to do, and it says here, run sudo yum update to apply all updates. So I like to work in root level access, so I don't have to constantly be adding the word sudo. So I'm going to do sudo su, and you can see I've been elevated to root. So if I just go clear, I can now do a yum update and hit yes, and it's now updating my kernel and applying all the latest security updates. So that's it. We have connected into our EC2 instance. We're applying updates, and we will configure this as a bootstrap script in later lectures. Just before I do go though, I will show you how to figure out what the default username is on any sort of Linux image. So if you're not using AMI, you're using things like Red Hat or CentOS or SUSE, your default username can be different. So I'm going to exit here. Now I'm back to my terminal connection. If I hit the up arrow, I can see the command that I use to connect to this instance. And I'm just going to remove my username. And you can see here, it just says, please log in as the user EC2-user rather than the user root. So if you just try and log in by default as root, it will tell you what the username is that you need to log into. But make sure you always include your private key there. So that concludes this lecture. We've provisioned our first EC2 instance. You've taken a step into a much wider world, and now this is where we start getting quite hands-on. We'll go through all the different things we can do with EC2. So if you've got time, join me in the next lecture. Thank you very much.